Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Let's take a look at Mark, the fourth chapter. That's where we are, and we are going over what is probably a very familiar story, so I just want to read it. And it says this in chapter 4, verses 35 and following. That day when evening came, he said to his disciples, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boats. There were also other boats with him. A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped. Jesus was in the stern, sleeping on a cushion. The disciples woke him and said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" He got up, rebuked the wind, and said to the waves, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind died down, and it was completely calm. He said to his disciples, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" They were terrified and asked each other, "Who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him." And as I think about this particular story, I don't know how many people have been on a boat. I don't know if you've, maybe a canoe or something, or maybe something in the ocean or something like that. I had a kind of a situation when in 2014, my whole family went with my mom and dad for their 50th wedding anniversary to Lake George. We kind of hung out there, and we took a boat ride on Lake George, and it was a beautiful day. The sky was blue, everything was nice, and then all of a sudden it got real dark real quick. And here we are in the middle of the lake, and you can see the shore and everything, and you can see the clouds rolling, and so, oh, that's interesting. And pretty soon, it was a squall. It was a downpour, and we could not see just only a few feet out into the water. We were all under a roof-type structure, so we weren't getting terribly wet. Maybe our feet were a little bit. But, it was kind of like, okay, we're just going to sit here. I wasn't really all that scared. It really wasn't all that. It was kind of like, okay, this is interesting. Here we are. I did think of this passage. And then all of a sudden, there was something that kind of just chilled us a little bit. There was a smaller boat that was making its way directly toward us, and they could not see us. They did not know that they were coming that fast upon us. And it looked like they were going to crash into us. And fortunately, the person who was in that boat hit a strong reverse or something just to keep from hitting us. I don't think that he was actually going anywhere. I think he was also sitting there, but he was being driven along by the winds and the waves, and he was going to crash into us if he didn't take some kind of drastic measures. It lasted for a few moments. It passed. We made it back. It was fun. We enjoyed it. This story here is nothing like that. What we have here in Scripture is nothing like that. What we have here is something that is much worse. We are talking about squalls on the Sea of Galilee come up from the southwest. They can be very quick, or they can be very long, and sometimes they can be terrible. This right here is a situation where they are in the boat at night. This is not typically the time that squalls come up, because the atmosphere is just not conducive to it necessarily, but this is a pretty bad storm. And so the storm is coming, and they did not have a roof over their heads like we did on that boat in Lake George. This was something that was much worse. I'm going to go a little bit metacognitive in this particular lesson, because I want us to take a look at some things here, because we've talked a little bit about the structure of Mark, and we've talked a little bit about the background of Mark, and we've talked a little bit about how things are going on, and really this has all the trappings of a story that was told in first-hand account. And if we remember, what we have here is Mark is considered Peter's spiritual son. We have that. Peter says that even in his letters. So Mark is very important to Peter. Peter is probably dead at this time, but I imagine what we have here is we have a first-hand account that Peter gave to Mark. And so this is what we have. But I want to go through this just a little bit and talk about the difference between a story versus account. And, we really don't think too much about this. Maybe it's not that big of a deal to us. But we say things like, well, it's just a story. What do we mean by that? What do we mean when we say, well, it's just a story? We generally mean, well, it's not really true. That's something that, it's just a story. It's just that. If it's an account, though, it is historical. This is something that is real. And we even go, and I'm not going to try to get into all of this. I have not done a deep dive into all of this, but there is some language that is very popular these days. It was popular in the early 2000s for us to be able to tell our story. Well, what's your story? And everyone was telling their story, their Ozempic story, or their South Beach diet story, or whatever else. And it was like, oh, that's a story? Not a very interesting plot, not a very interesting character formation, whatever. But that's what it is. And the idea of your truth. It's your truth. And we speak our truth. And there is a subjectivity to that. There is all of that. But I would like to submit that as we take a look at these scriptures and we take a look at what our commission is to go and seek and save the lost, as we are out and about and among people, especially the younger generations today, there is this idea of well, you know what, this is just a book of stories. That's all this is. It's made up. And I want us to think about this a lot, because I think what we have here in a lot of what is going on in today's world is there are a lot of people who are questioning whether or not this is real. And if we are among people who are not challenging us with that thought, we may be in a spiritual bubble. We may be in a spiritual echo chamber. We need to be engaging in the world, and we need to be engaging that world with the truth of the gospel. We need to be engaging the world with the accounts of what actually happened, what is actually historical reality. And this has all the trappings in the making of an account. I will still probably say we're going to tell the story of this or that or whatever. I'm going to do that from time to time. And that's okay as long as we understand this is an account. This is true. And so we have several different markers of this that make it sound like it's first account. That day when evening came. So in other words, Jesus is talking in parables. He is talking in parables from a boat. He is explaining things to his disciples off on the side and things like this. This is happening. But on that day, so what is going on is this happened on the same day that Jesus was teaching these parables, when he was telling the parable of the growing seed, and the parable of the mustard seed, and the parable of the sower, and the parable of the lamp on the stand. He is telling that story, and this is on the same day. And we have a situation where the person who is telling this, he's saying, okay, well, let's go to the other side of the lake, and leaving the crowd behind, they took him along just as he was in the boat. And then there's this like side note, there were also other boats with him. We weren't the only boat on the water. First-hand account. We have the story of the waves broke over the boat. Story, I see, I used it. We have this account of the waves breaking over the boat, so it was nearly swamped. And so the situation is, it's like, I want you to know exactly how serious this situation was. We were concerned because there was an awful lot of water. And we have Jesus sleeping in the stern on a cushion. And we have this whole thing going on here where Jesus is actually sleeping, and it's actually the only account that we have of Jesus actually sleeping. It's right here. He was asleep. Okay? And we have this entire situation where this is happening, and the disciples are waking him, and he's saying, "Teacher, do you not care if we drown?" There is a sense of urgency here. This is a song that we sang about this just a few moments ago. Okay, about Jesus being able to handle all of this. "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" There's some indignation there. It's like, what are you doing asleep here? And I think that what is going on here with Jesus in all of this is he's asking some questions. Quiet, be still. And he says, "Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith?" So the question, I think, is bigger than just, hey, the storm. I think the question is, has the kingdom come or not? Is the kingdom coming or not? And I think what is going on here is Jesus is saying, look, I'm here with you. I am here in control. And this whole thing, this whole kingdom thing is in process right now. I've talked to you just now about all these parables. I've talked to you about the different grounds on which seed is sown. I've talked to you about a growing seed. We don't know how it grows or why it grows or anything like that, but it grows and it will be harvested. We've talked to you about a lamp on a stand that you will see by. We've talked to you about a small little mustard seed and how it grows and becomes something that is huge, that you can't miss. We've talked about all that. Are we there yet, or are we in process? What is going on? The kingdom business is the kingdom business, and as long as I am with you, there's nothing that's going to stop that kingdom. not the storm. We have Jesus very much in control. I'm thinking about this, and you have a situation where it's not a very big boat. And he is asleep on a cushion while the wind and the waves are tossing it around. First off, I think he must have been very tired. Secondly, he just wasn't concerned. He knew what his mission was. He knew that everything was going to be okay, but the other thing is, he knows that he has control over this. He knows that God has control over this. He knows that this is not a problem, and so here he is, he's asleep in the middle of the storm. And I think, again, we're going to go a little bit meta on here, but I think, again, what we have is we have some realities reflected in the Gospel of Mark that are very, very important for us to see. And I'm going to use these literary terms, man versus, man versus, man versus. I am mindful that that's kind of archaic language, but it is still, in literary circles, something that is used. But what we have here is we have various realities that are reflected here. Man versus society. And as we see in the Gospel of Mark, we see some of these things going on. And I think that as we take a look at these, they'll become clear. If we take a look at what is going on in Mark chapter 2, verse 2, we have the society who is gathered at the door of this house as Jesus and his disciples are in that particular house. And we know this story. This is where Jesus heals the paralytic. And again, I use that word story, right? We're not getting caught up on that, right? It's an account. This happened. Okay? So we have here where there's no room and they let people in. And what's going on here again is that Jesus is constantly having to deal with crowds. He's constantly having to deal with society. He's constantly having to deal with how society wants him to act, what they want him to do. We have the same situation where there are teachers of the law in 322 who come down from Jerusalem and they say he is possessed by Beelzebub, by the prince of demons. He is driving out demons. And so we have these societal pressures on him. We see again in his very family structure in verses 31 and 32 of chapter 3, where Jesus' mother and brothers are arriving and standing outside. They sent someone to call him out. And a crowd was sitting around him, and they told him, your mother and brothers are outside looking for you. And so Jesus is dealing with these societal pressures. He's dealing with these particular ways of being. And we see, and we're going to go a little bit further on this, but we see that he is having to deal with all of that. This is a literary type. You will see this all the time in your movies and your novels and all this kind of stuff. And I think the way you need to realize is, again, we talked about this a little bit in class, again, our lives reflect a spiritual reality at all times. As people who are created in God's image, what Jesus deals with and what God deals with is an awful lot about what we deal with. So we are made in this particular thing. We see man versus nature. This is the story that we are looking at. This is this account that we are looking at right now. We see man versus another. It's usually man versus man, but man versus another. And as we take a look at verse 13 of chapter 1, what is going on? He was led into the desert. He was there for 40 days being tempted by Satan, by another entity. But we also see this in 123 in what is going on there. There was a man in the synagogue who was possessed by an evil spirit, and he cried out, what do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God. So there is this one-on-one conflict. 139. So he traveled throughout Galilee, proclaiming, preaching in their synagogues, and driving out demons. We see it all throughout the book of Mark. But we also see it in man versus himself, and that's that inner turmoil that we often have in ourselves, and Jesus dealt with that too, didn't he? And so we have these withdrawal scenes where after he is dealing with these crowds, what does he do? He withdraws to quiet places. He goes off. And what he is doing in that particular situation, he is dealing with, these are the societal pressures, these are what people want to do with me, this is what other people are confronting me with, and I need to get alone by myself, and I need to confront myself, because really, it is very tempting to give into the crowd. It is really tempting to give the people what they want. It is really tempting to give into peer pressure. And so Jesus, he is withdrawing. And we see really in the most horrific of ways him dealing with this in the Garden of Gethsemane, don't we? We're not going to read that story. We're not going to read that account. But what we've got here in Gethsemane is Jesus is dealing with, am I going to go through with this? Not my will, but yours be done. And he sweat drops of blood, and he did all of this. And what he was doing is, he's saying, okay, this is what I want, God, and this is what you want. And what I want is, I want my will to line up with your will so that I will do exactly what you want. And if you will take this from me, great. But if you won't take this from me, then I'm going to go ahead and go through with it. So he deals with this on a very personal level. It's important for us to understand that this is something that he did, that this is something that he deals with. We deal with it ourselves in our own faith, but we also see that Jesus had to do this. He had to do this if he was going to be perfect for us. He had to do this if he was going to be our Savior. The Hebrews passage, Hebrews 4, I'll start in 14. It says, therefore, since we have a great high priest who has gone through the heavens, Jesus the Son of God, let us hold firmly to the faith we possess. Now that's the part that is easy for us. He's gone through the heavens. Yes, we see him glorified in all of this. But how did he get there? For we do not have a high priest who is unable to sympathize with our weaknesses. But we have one who has been tempted in every way just as we are, yet was without sin. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence, so that we may receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need. And so we have this situation where Jesus is dealing with all of these things, and these reflections and these realities are reflected in Jesus' life. And he is taking a look at his disciples, and he's taking a look at what is going on here, and he's saying, where is your faith? How are you going to deal with societal pressures? How are you going to deal with terrible situations? We have hurricanes and we have all sorts of earthquakes and all that kind of. How are you going to deal with that when the storms come, literally? How are you going to deal with it when you are in conflict with another person? How are you going to deal with that inner conflict that you have of, I really just don't want to do the right thing here? Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? What are you going to be? You're going to be the seed that grows? Or not? What is it? What is your seed? I think that this is an often overgeneralized thing. I think that what we have oftentimes is we have a lot of people who talk, well, I've gone through the storm, Jesus has gotten me through the storm, he calmed the storm, and all of this. And I think that that's fine and good for us to think in that way, but I also think we need to be very specific. It's not just, oh yeah, my life has been a storm, but I've gotten through it. It's like, how has God actually helped me? What has he gotten me through? And it's not just a matter, I don't think, of him just simply calming the storm. But I also think it's a matter of helping us ride the storm out when it comes. Because sometimes those storms come and it's not an easy resolution, is it? It's not something that, oh, well, that was something in my past and I'm done. It's, I'm going through this for weeks or months or even years. Jesus, he's in the boat with us. The early church looked at this as a metaphor for persecution, and you will find in early art the idea of the church as a boat on the stormy seas, and it was something that the early church definitely went through. As we take a look at Mark, and while he was writing, the early church is going through persecution. Peter, his father in the faith, is dead. Paul is dead. Most of the disciples, most of the apostles by this time are dead. And so we have a situation, not all of them, but most of them are dead. John is going to live another 30 years. They go through this persecution and all this kind of stuff. And so what Mark is instilling within him is there are going to be some things that come up and they are going to unsettle us. Be ready for it. And the fact is, we might not get through what we are going through now, even with our lives. Are we okay with that? Do we trust Jesus? Do we trust God that he will see us through to the other side? And I think also what we have to understand here is in all of this, oftentimes our seed, in a disciples' way of looking at it right now, is anything we don't think Jesus can handle. In a certain sense, if we know that Jesus can handle it, then we're okay. Anybody like roller coasters? I used to. Now I get off of them and wonder when my next chiropractic appointment is. But one of the reasons why we like roller coasters is it's safe danger. We're on it, we're going up, we're going down, we're going loops, we're doing all these things, and we get off on the other side. That was fun, let's do it again. It's those things that don't have the guardrails that throw us off. And so if we have Jesus with us, we have the guardrails. If we don't have Jesus with us, then we don't have the guardrails. And as I think about what the writer said, who shall separate us from the love of God? Nothing. We have the guardrails as long as Jesus is with us. And so, what is our seed? Maybe we don't even have a seed. When we truly have the faith that Jesus is calling us to have. Why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? And so the challenge for me and the challenge for all of us at this time, I think, is to constantly ask, what is our seed and how are we giving this over to Jesus? If you're not his child, you don't have the guardrails. You just don't have them. And so every single week, we invite you to come and be a part of Jesus' body, his church. And we do that every single Sunday, and we tell you every single Sunday that if you want to make this decision sometime later, that's fine, but there is no time like the present, and we want people to have these guardrails. We want people to have salvation. We want people to be with Jesus. And the Bible is clear about how to do that. We must join in the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ in the waters of baptism to become a new creature. Clothed in Christ. You can't get much safer than that. So if this is the decision that you've made today, please come as we stand and sing.